Hey, so this video is going to be not exactly a response, but sort of inspired by a video called My Disconnect with Anime by someone, I don't remember their name, but I'll put a link to the video in the description. It was linked to me on Twitter, and I think it does a great job of representing a stance that I've seen a lot of people take. A lot of people who are interested in anime and enjoy it, but just can't quite get into it the way that they can Western films and TV shows, especially TV shows. And this guy was raising the point that he's a big fan of shows like Mad Men and The Wire and Breaking Bad and all these very highly respected, Western dramas. And that in all the anime that he's seen that he enjoys shows like Fate Zero and Steins Gate, and I don't remember the other one he named, but it's along those same lines. And he was sort of lamenting that those shows aren't as good as the Western shows that he's a fan of, and he was kind of wondering why that might be the case, positing that he thought it had to do with just the way that animation is made, that it's more difficult to create nuance in animation. I won't get too deep into what he was saying there because I think that stuff's all kind of just misguided, his reasonings for why. But I think it's almost entirely a cultural difference thing and has a lot less to do with the overall quality of the shows, though it also does have to do with the fact that anime, is typically much shorter, doesn't really have time to go into the depth and details that some of those other shows do. If you want to watch an anime that is the closest to those Western shows, Legend of the Galactic Heroes. It's exactly that style of show. It's a show that's about a big, huge story with lots of different moving parts to it, with very adult characters, lots of nuanced scenes and conflicts, but I will note that what this guy was sort of complaining about was that anime has lots of exposition and characters just kind of describing the ideas of the plot. Like, rather than a story that just happens to have these nuanced themes in the background, in anime, characters tend to just explain the themes. And he was citing the Banquet of Kings from Fate Zero, which is funny because it's my favorite scene in the whole show. The scenes from Ghost in the Shell where characters sort of just describe themes back and forth. And I'd say a lot of it happens in Legend of Galactic Heroes as well. And the way I see it, I actually like that almost more than the way that Western shows do it. And so this is sort of my disconnect with Western media, with Western TV shows, is that to me, all I see when I look at those shows is mechanics. I just see the mechanics of what you're supposed to do to make a good story. Not to say that they don't succeed. Like a show like Game of Thrones, I feel like it's almost plug and play. It's like setting up all the pieces. You set up all these different characters and what their relationships are going to be, and then you just kind of hit the play button and let it all happen in the way that makes the most sense dramatically. You just kind of let it all run its course, and I feel like all of those shows of that nature, you can see the same elements. The twists happen in the same places, the same people are getting fucked over in the same ways, and it's so much of just like watching the system play itself out. And that's how I feel watching those. Like with anime, I feel much more like each show has a distinctive idea that show is trying to communicate. It's not trying to fit into the mold of what is the perfect show. Like all those HBO dramas, I feel like they're just trying to create the perfect drama. The drama with the most the characters who are deeply flawed, yet you can relate to them and follow them, and each one is complicated and nuanced, and the story has these and those themes and stuff, and it's got to run through the same kind of stuff. But ultimately, the feeling I get from all of them is exactly the same. It's always, well, that was a good drama. Usually it's a total downer. Man, I sure do feel depressed after watching the latest episode of Game of Thrones, Mad Men, or Breaking Bad, And those are only the best ones, and like all the ones that are trying to follow those are just trying to do the same thing but even worse, and to me that pollutes the emotions of even those shows. And I have more respect for like The Wire in particular, because even though The Wire still does that, it still is in that format. There's also lots of weird tangents in The Wire, like weird little almost slice of life bits that are trying to drag you in, and all these shows kind of have that. Game of Thrones has its weird slice of lifey moments that are also fun, but I just can't ever shake that feeling that I'm just watching the machine play itself out. Whereas when I start up an anime series, I kind of don't know what I'm gonna get. Like, anime, they don't tend to follow the rules very well. They don't tend to, like, just go along. And I think that's why people get so frustrated with, like, every action show. Because when it comes to plot-driven anime, people get started with it expecting it to do the machine. They expect it to go through the motions and, you know, have the dramatic, like, it's supposed to have the tight pacing and the dramatic character moments, and that's why you get people complaining, like, I liked this show, but nobody died, so it didn't have enough punch, you know, or, I didn't like the way that the story got weird in the second half, you know, but, like, to me, that's what makes anime exciting, is that it's not gonna give me the same emotions that I got from every single other show in the medium. And, like, you know, I get completely bored watching Western shows, even if they're great, even if I can completely appreciate everything that's good about it, and I can look at it and I go, wow, that show is incredibly well made. But when you watch an anime that feels like it was made by a really small team who didn't really know what they were doing, but they communicated some really out there, interesting idea, that's always way more fascinating to me, you know? And I think to get into it a little bit more on a cultural level, like, to use some quotes from an interview that just came out today, that Egoraptor did with Hiroyuki Imaishi and Yo Yoshinari, the directors who run, Imaishi runs Studio Trigger, director of Kill La Kill, Panty and Stocking, Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. Yo Yoshinari is the director of Little Witch Academia. And he was talking to them about the way that they sort of incorporate Western influences into their works, and why do they do that, and, like, what are they going for? And Imaishi was describing how in Japan, things are a lot more about atmosphere. Viewers don't necessarily want things that roll really fast and move quickly and have, like, lots of different, where, like, every scene is important. Which I feel like is something that in Western TV, we've got this idea that, like, the drama has to constantly be heightened. Like, every episode has to have a plot twist. Every episode has to have something dramatic happen at the end, a cliffhanger, something that keeps your attention and makes you like, oh, the show's crazy stuff's happening, you know? But whereas in Japan, it's much more about the general feeling of the show. What mood does this show put you in? Which is why you have a genre like Iyashikei, which is literally just a soothing show, and that's the point of it, is to soothe you. Or, you know, like, all these different, pretty much any genre that you could put together in anime is less about the what of the story and more about the feeling of it, and, like, what kind of emotions it draws out of you. And it was funny because Trigger was saying how they find that boring and they like to have just crazy nonstop action happening, which is why their shows are like that. But they take it to such a further extreme. And there was a great quote from Imaishi where he says, like, maybe because Egoraptor was pointing out that the reason that American cosplayers will just wear their cosplay out in public is because they kind of mistakenly maybe think that it's like that in Japan. And Imaishi later said, maybe the reason that our use of Western influence comes out different is that we're not really understanding what Westerners are looking for. Like, what are they actually interested in, you know? And they're not trying to make their shows for the West. They're just incorporating those influences because they think it's interesting. And I think that's definitely true, because by no means would any of Imaishi's work come off as Western styled, maybe Panty and Stocking a little bit, but even then, just the sheer weirdness of any of his work could not really be compared to the West. But the pacing of it is a little bit faster and a little bit more of that, like, constant things happening. And I also, from that interview, want to pull out a line that Yo Yoshinari had about the delight of watching technique, that a lot of people really enjoy just seeing something be well made. And he described it as, when you watch someone draw a perfect straight line, that can be entertaining for some people. And that's what I think Western media is, and what people are looking for, and what they don't understand when they look at anime is that they're all looking for the technique of create perfect show, of create perfect drama, create that perfect crescendo of emotions that happens, and that perfect flow. And with anime, there's just a lot of different flows. It's not all trying to be that. It's not all trying to be the same thing. So, like, when you look at something like Steins Gate, if you compared that to a Western show, it's like, well, Steins Gate is a visual novel. You know, like, it's adapted to anime, but it's originally something that's meant to be taken at a much different pace that you're supposed to kind of get engrossed in. Like, I would read Steins Gate more like a book, like a mystery novel, than I would compare it to, you know, an HBO show or something that's trying to be written around an episodic format and a seasonal format. You know, Steins Gate is meant to be consumed like a book, and when you think of it that way, it all kind of makes sense. And then when you look at Fate Zero, similarly, it's a series of books and based around a visual novel, and like those, I think Fate Zero is definitely closer to the feeling of those HBO shows, and that's why that show is so popular with that crowd. Like, when I talk to someone who's into, like, Western film and Western cinema, you can get them into the same anime every time. It's always going to be, like, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Fate Zero, Steins Gate, Kaiji, and I'm bringing this up because I was recently getting Mumkey anime recommendations, and Mumkey's this kind of viewer who's like looking for these deep stories that are like very well told, dramatic narratives, and I just don't think that that's what anime specializes in. I think anime specializes in giving you tons of unique little outlooks that you can kind of say, well, you know, you come to for that. You don't come to it for a great show in that perfect mold. You come to it for what the show offers. You go to Iyashikei if you want to relax. You go to, you know, a high school rom-com if you want to chill out and have fun and maybe feel a little nostalgic or feel that spark of, like, romance. You know, I watch romance shows, I guess, to get jealous and to live vicariously through a love that I don't get to experience, you know. You come to an action show to see cool animation and to see great spectacle, you know, or you come to a fucking weird show just to see some fucking weird shit. But, like, I just think that's the disconnect. I don't think it's that anime is bad at doing what Western shows are doing. I don't think it's trying to. I don't think there's any anime that's setting out to be an HBO drama, especially because they wouldn't want to. There's no reason to try to, like you know, as Imaishi says in that interview, like, this is from Trigger, who are one of the most Western influenced studios out there, and he's like, yeah, we don't make our stuff for a Western audience at all. Like, there's no guarantee of success there. The market is super weird and hard to interpret and stuff, and we just make stuff for Japan, you know? I don't think there's any anime that's going out of its way to be like a Western show. They have a different goal, and I, as a longtime viewer of anime, know, like, have an easy sense of, like, watching the first episode of a show and getting where it's trying to come from, and I can very easily make distinctions between, well, that show's for me, that show's not, you know, and get the most out of it, and, like, get the most out of what I think the show is trying to give me, as opposed to coming to it with my preconceived notions of what I think a good show would be. So yeah, that's how I feel about that disconnect. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Shout out to the guy who made that video. I'll make sure to link it in the description. And see you in the next one.